And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the second session of our conference today. And allow me to introduce our panelists. But before that, please remember that there will be, interpretation. So if you need the Arabic translation, you just click on the icon below. You will see the globe below, and you can follow the instructions, and it will be translated into Arabic. This session, most of our speakers or all of our speakers will introduce their topic in English. Allow me to introduce our three panelists today. Dr. Durayra Maqbali من جامعة Sultan Qaboos from, she is Assistant Professor in Curriculum and Methods Department at the College of Education in Sultan Qaboos University. She received her PhD from Birmingham University. And then she will be talking, inshallah, about the voices needed to be heard. It will be a qualitative exploration of physical education teachers' professional learning experience in post-basic schools in Muscat. Then our second speaker will be Dr. Ayman. Mr. Ayman Hefnawi from the Ministry of Education in UAE. Mr. Ayman is a mathematics lead teacher at the Ministry of Education. He also a PhD candidate at the University of Bath in UK. He will be talking about empowering teachers to lead the reform towards promoting genuine change. And then our last but not least speaker will be Dr. Emily Anderson from she's an assistant professor of international and intellectual education in the Department of Educational Policy Studies and affiliated faculty with the Center for Women and Gender Studies at Florida International University. And it's like 3 a.m. there, and she's joining us with a very unique mug to introduce her topic, which will be teacher reflection as catalyst for intellectual pedagogical transfer. So we will start with Dr. Durayra.
Yes.
The floor is all yours. Please, you will have 12 to 15 minutes to speak and to introduce your topic. Good luck.
Thank you very much. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. أشكر اللجنة المنظمة اللي نظمت هذا المؤتمر. ما أعرف إذا سلايد واضحة معكم سلايد؟
Still, it's not showing.
Just now
it is showing. Good luck.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد. Actually today I'm glad to share you one of my thesis paper in PhD, which has done in 2019. And it's about voices needed to be heard, qualitative exploration of physical education teachers' professional learning experience in the post-basic schools in the Sultanate of Oman. And before I go to the another slides and to go in more details, I would like to inform you why I have selected the post-basic education or schools in Oman. Because actually post-basic education firstly means grade 11, and grade 12. And I have selected the teachers who worked in this post-basic education because in this post-basic education, BE subject is elective subject, and the student who select these subjects or elective subjects, the grade will be accounted in the final grade at the end of the academic year. And also the teachers who teach in these post-basic schools in Oman supposed to receive like more programs in order to like improve their practice or their teaching. For that, I focus on these post-basic educations, and I focus on the teachers who teach in these kind of the schools. Continuing professional development, actually there is no doubt that like improving the quality of education is like a priority internationally, and the most of the countries most of the countries seek to enhance the quality of education, and this can be by enhancing the practice of the teachers who supposed to like to engage in different kind of professional development program in order to enhance their practice and enhance their teaching, and in order at the end to help the students to enhance their learning. So when we hear like the terms of continuing professional development, sometimes it comes in our mind, it's like kind like a formal like program, like workshop and like a conference and other who organized by like organization or CBD providers and Ministry of Education and so on. But in reality, continuing professional development, it can be any type of practice that teacher can engage in it in order to enhance their practice and the skills and update the knowledge in order to improve their teaching practice at the school and help the student to improve their learning at the end. So the continuing professional development or the type of the practice can be formal and informal and non-formal. So I'm going briefly to discuss about these three types of like the program of professional development. So formal is referred to like to structured and organized programs for the teacher, which lead at the end of to have like a certificate, like participating in like in conference, like courses, like workshops, and also all the timing and all the targeting group and the location and duration and everything organized by CBD providers. It's more like a structured program, but in informal program, it can take any place. It can take any place, even in the in the class, in the schools, and it's like sharing like ideas with other teachers, sharing like different sources and modify some ideas to apply in the class. But non-formal, it's a bit close to formal, but it's different. It's not linked to like to a formal like a certificate at the end. It's like a peer teaching in the schools, and sometimes it's like mentoring the schemes of the newly appointed teacher at the school, and like collaborative learning with others like colleges in the school. So what works? Sorry. So what works well in professional development program, or what the teachers needs when they engage in different professional programs, which formal or informal or non-formal. Just to note that informal, the teacher doing by themselves, there is no like rule, no certificate, nothing. They can like search idea with the other colleges by YouTube or website, any kind of informal. But now I'm talking about the formal and non-formal, especially. What makes this effective, and what the teacher needs when they participate in this program in order to help their teaching practice and at the end enhance the students' learning. So what makes this effective? When it has actually impact on teacher practice and student learning, and also when it's developed or update the teacher knowledge on the subject they teach. And also when it's has a follow-up. It's not just delivering like a kind of like a workshop or conference or courses and without any follow-up. It has to be like a follow-up in order to make sure that teachers will take this experience or take this knowledge to the school and share all this idea with the colleges at the school. So also Also, it's important that when to make sure that the school has the facilities, because sometimes the teacher like participate in different program and they updated the knowledge and they have a new strategies and new like teaching methods and so on. But when they want to take all this experience to the school, they like they found that the school itself like it has lack of these facilities. They cannot apply what they have learned in the conference or the workshop in the school. So also to make sure that the facilities of the school it's good and the teacher can apply what they have learned from different programs in the school and share with other colleges. However, teacher, even they are like they know the benefits of participating in formal and like non-formal, but they prefer more in informal because it can be in the schools in any time. There is no like cost. I'm talking about in general, not in Oman, because most of the professional development program in Oman are free. But in general, they prefer to participate in this kind of program because there's no cost anytime they want, and usually it's at home. So I'm going to talk briefly about the CBD in Oman. BE is a teachers. It's in general for all the teachers in the Sultanate of Oman. Actually, there are two types of formal CBD programs in Oman, which is centralized and decentralized. Centralized program is provided to the teachers by Ministry of Education. It's organized by Ministry of Education. One of the like CBD providers have to offer a workshop for the teachers, and it can be for the teachers, for supervisors, special education teachers. But decentralized program, it's over by governorate. For example, only Muscat or only like Salala, it's something like this, because we have 9 governorate in Oman and 11 governorate in Oman, and each governorate has to provide their own like courses or their own workshop or their own conference for the teachers. And even this like this type of like professional program, most of them are formal, but there's there are some limitation of these CBD in Oman, and this is not different from other countries, because according to the Ministry of Education, which has done a study on 2009, it's like a survey for the teachers, they found some limitation in the programs that provided to the teacher by Ministry of Education. For example, is not sufficient in supporting like teachers' need, and it doesn't like update their knowledge. And there is like it's not too much available for the teachers, and also there is no update for the like for the teacher experience or teacher knowledge, and most of them are repeated sometimes for the teacher, most of the program. For that. There is another established of like institute in Oman, which is special center for the professional training of a teacher, and established in 2014 in order to increase like the support for the teachers, and in order to address the limitation of the formal CBD in Oman. So because, as we said, I'm not going to talk about this special center because I will take time to talk about it, but because that teacher is the one or the most important factor in order to enhance the teaching or the learning at the school, it's very important to listen to the teacher and hear to teacher what they want from this CBD, or what they want when they participate in different like CBD program. For that, this study was aimed actually to listen to the teacher and to examine the teacher experience and perceptions regarding the nature and the quality and the effectiveness of what they have like what they have already like know about this CBD and what is effective and what they need teacher. So this is the study is all to hear about the teacher what they need from CBD and what is the limitation and the challenge they faced when they participate in different CBD in Oman. In Muscat especially. So I'm going also briefly to talk about the methodology. I selected around 5 post-basic schools in Muscat, post-basic, as I said, grade 11 and 12, and the total of the teachers was 11. And I used semi-structured interviews, 3 interviews for each teacher with follow-up. And I used the NVivo program to organize all the interviews and come with the...
Dr. Durayra, I'm sorry to cut you, but we only have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to just going to the summarize the discussion and the conclusion. Sorry for that. So teachers strongly, in conclusion about this study, I coming with different key points. First, teachers strongly believe that participate in formal and informal can improve their teaching practice, but they argue that some of the CPD will not be sufficient, and they have the experience that formal CPD failed to meet their needs and to update their knowledge. And also most of the formal, as I said, is relative in their profession, and their voice is usually sometimes ignored, and can willing to involve teacher in selecting the content of the program. And they said to address this problem, teacher recommended that all the directors should pay attention, or the CPD providers should pay attention with the teacher what they need. And they have to ask teacher to join them to select the topic what they want from the CPD program, and also to increase and improve the facilities of the schools. In conclusion, it's this study is not generalized, as I said. It's because of the small scales, and there is a clear message that designing CPD program it's very important when we design any CPD program to listen the teacher, because the teacher who are teaching in the schools, and they know more about what the difficulties they have faced in the school when they want to teach, and what they want actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Durayra, for this informative session about the PE teachers in Sultanate Oman. And now we move to Dr. Ayman.
Stakeholders have important roles in implementing educational reforms. Teachers mostly take the blame for any unsatisfactory outcomes of reforms. And this is reasonable, as teachers are the leaders of learning. In a recent study that investigated the school effectiveness in Abu Dhabi, Al-Ahbabi importantly noted that teachers don't admit any responsibility for unsatisfactory outcomes of education reforms. Do teachers resist the change? And is this the reason of the reform's unsatisfactory outcomes? Before we can answer this question, we need to find some answers to some simple questions. These questions pertain to teachers' voice in policymaking, and also teachers' understanding of the reform purpose. Are teachers prepared to accept and lead the introduced change? Is the professional development effective in preparing teachers to achieve the reform goals? And what impact do this professional development on student learning? A more fundamental question is about how comfortable are teachers in admitting inadequate performance. There are some limitations associated with reform's top-down approach, imposing the change on teachers with little understanding of its purpose, and also the pedagogy messages sometimes are unclear and even conflicting. Also, there are too many initiatives introduced with little follow-up and little reward to teachers' outstanding performance. Also, the impact of the introduced initiatives on student learning are mostly unclear. And most importantly to me as a teacher, is the fact that the effects of these initiatives in terms of accountability and compliance can take the joy out of teaching and learning practices. There are some benefits of listening to teachers' voice. These benefits include an improved policy enactment in schools, and also teachers will be more committed to achieving the goals of the reforms, and it will help in bridging the traditional gap between the reform policy and practice. Also, it's a cycle, so teachers' feedback will inform the improvement of policy, and the impact on student learning can be measured, which will help in achieving some sort of a sustainable learning improvement in schools. The United Arab Emirates has achieved huge improvements in terms of the quality and the quantity of professional development programs. There is now professional learning communities across schools, and there is a large scale development and professional development programs. Also, there are many types of the professional development, face-to-face and online, synchronous and asynchronous professional development. And especially in the beginning of the outbreak of COVID-19, the United Arab Emirates had implemented very effective professional development programs to help teachers improve their ability to design, deliver, and assess students in online lessons. However, there is some area of improvement in terms of professional development, which tends to be providing the same materials to all teachers, despite the fact that they have diverse professional learning needs and the context of their schools is different. Also, teachers need to pay more attention to the design and implementation of their own professional development programs. And more importantly, there is a need to measure the impact of the training on student learning. For this goal, we here propose a professional development model. This model is a school-based professional development program. The program starts with collecting data about teachers' practice and student learning, and then we determine the training needs, then deliver the training to teachers, and then we collect data about the new teaching practices and student learning, and the difference in practice in terms of teaching practices and student learning provide the impact of the implemented program, which provides two forms, formative and summative forms of assessment, which help improve the quality and develop the quality of the implemented program and inform another cycle of improvement, which provides some sort of sustainable learning improvement in schools. Another professional development limitation is the need to more professional collaboration between teachers. Recent research referred to the fact that teachers' professional interaction and collaboration have very important role in sustaining improvement in terms of student learning. For this reason, we recommend helping teachers to develop their professional interaction from the current active professional learning communities where teachers share their experience and they work collaboratively to improve their knowledge and skills with the goal of improving their students' achievement, which is fine, but a more developed form of this collaboration would be forming inquiry learning networks where teachers collaborate with student learning in mind. They focus on the improvement of students' learning experience through the identified gaps between teaching practices and student learnings, and this will help in collecting more data about the impact of teacher collaboration and teacher training on student learning experiences, which provides an improved sustainability in terms of the improvement of student learning. So, instead of blaming teachers for any unsatisfactory outcomes, we need to empower teachers, we need to provide teachers an active voice in reforms and effective professional development programs that fit with their own learning needs and their students' learning needs. Equally important is to conduct educational research to provide evidence about the impact of the implemented training on student learning. Also, other stakeholders have important roles in the achievement of the reform goals, so we need to take this into great consideration. Key messages to improve the implementation of education reforms is to provide teachers an active voice in policy making, also to reward teachers for their outstanding performance, to provide teachers with effective professional development programs that fit with their learning needs and with their students' learning needs, and to collect evidence about the impact of this professional development on student learning, and also to help teachers to form inquiry learning networks that is focused on improving student learning. And finally, I'd like to thank you for your attention today. If anyone has questions, I will try my best to answer for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman, for this asynchronous recorded session that was amazing and a different experience with different outcomes. Now we move to Dr. Emily from Florida. And remember, we have the Q&A box that you can, start, writing your questions. So at the end of this panel, we will be able to address all of your inquiries. Thank you. Emily, the floor is all yours.
Hello, good day, colleagues and friends. My name is Emily Anderson, and I'm an assistant professor of international and intercultural education at Florida International University in Miami, Florida, in the United States. And I'm speaking to you today about teacher reflection as a catalyst for international pedagogical transfer. And before I get started, I would like to acknowledge the support of the Al-Qasimi Foundation in conducting and supporting this research. I was very humbled to be the recipient of a Visiting Scholar Award from the Al-Qasimi Foundation. And so the research that I'm going to present for you this morning reflects over 2 years engagement with a group of teachers that I'd like to introduce next. And so I would love to start with a quote that really grounds the context of this study. And so before going into much of the context, I want to first talk about a teacher's perspective. And so you'll see here the quote that is on our screen is from a participant in a international intercultural professional development exchange experience where a group of teachers from the UAE traveled to Vietnam for the purpose of professional development. And then my role in this project was to study what happens when a group of teachers get together and travel abroad together for the purpose of professional development. And so this teacher remarked that we knew Vietnam as the destination for the 2018 teacher exchange program trip to Vietnam. Says, well, we knew Vietnam was ranked number 12 in PISA, which is the Program for International Student Assessment, in 2015, which means it has a hidden secret. And so the work that I'm going to share with you today discusses how teachers think about internationally comparative policy discourses, particularly around student achievement as measured by large-scale international testing programs like PISA. So what happens when those ideas about the purpose of teachers' professional development to improve, or one of the things to improve student achievement, what happens when teachers engage in that process? And so the purpose of the study was to ask, how does reflection catalyze teachers' intercultural pedagogical transfer? And so to understand reflection, we have to think about it as not only the reflection of an experience, but what teachers make of an experience and how they transfer what they learn, particularly when we go abroad for professional learning. How do we transfer what we learn back into our own classroom contexts? And so my study is really looking at what happens when teachers engage in professional development that takes us outside of our local contexts and also immerses us in global discourses, particularly around international achievement. And so in doing this study, I thought a lot about what makes a professional development experience useful and contextual for teachers. And so here I draw from literature from colleagues working really across a few different, in a few different fields, particularly thinking about Brookfield's work on critical reflection. And so we know that not all professional development experiences, as my colleagues have discussed so far this morning, result in teachers changing practice when they leave the professional development experience, whether it's local or internationalized. And so I was interested in what happens and what makes teachers connect with practices that they observe outside of their local contexts to when they return to their home classrooms. And so when thinking about Brookfield and others, I posit that that process can happen in a few different ways. And so through an exposure event, like traveling abroad for a professional development or professional learning experience is the first step. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the practices that teachers observe in one context will become part of their professional learning and then part of their pedagogical practices once they return to their home classrooms. And so I was interested in sort of the distance between this exposure event and transfer, which I operationalized for the purpose of this study and others as the ability for teachers to learn and to contextualize practices that they observe or that they're exposed to from other contexts. And that can be, as is in this study's case, an international professional development travel experience. But I think that this conceptual framework can also apply to other instances where teachers are exposed to practices that might be new, that might be sourced from or reflective of policy or expectations or standards from other countries and contexts. And so what this model helps us to see is that exposure does not necessarily mean that transfer always happens in the same way. And so as I'll show in the presentation of findings that will follow in a moment, that really what was most interesting to me is the ways that teachers sort of move through this model of critical reflection to not just participate in an activity, but to get to more of an empathy and an adaptation approach rather than a dissonance and an adoption approach, which I'll discuss in a moment. And so before going into the data and methods used in this study, I'd like to introduce a little bit about the teacher exchange program itself. And so the teacher exchange program is an international exchange where groups of teachers from the United Arab Emirates have the opportunity to travel for the purpose of a classroom observation and cultural immersion to different destinations as supported by a foundation working in the United Arab Emirates. And so this program has been around for many years, and I had the opportunity to begin working with a foundation and with the teacher exchange program as part of their 2018 trip to Vietnam. And so Vietnam was selected for a few reasons, but the one that is most salient that I'll introduce now was its performance in PISA 2015. And so, as we might recall, that Vietnam exceeded expectations both internationally and nationally in its case to raise student achievement in PISA. And so it became sort of an example for many countries who were looking to improve their own PISA outcomes, and sort of looking at comparison from a more South-to-South cooperation lens than a global North to global South cooperation lens. And so the teachers that I had the opportunity to work with through this project and to study with along with in this project were 19 altogether. And so 10 identified as women, and these women were all teachers or school leaders, and the remaining participants identified as male, and they were all representatives working with the Ministry of Education. And so as part of the teacher exchange program, all participants were required to complete an action research project that would help them to think about taking lessons learned from their observational and cultural immersion experiences in Vietnam over the course of 6-day study tour in the spring of 2018. And the action research project was designed and developed as part of their pre-departure activities and then completed as an outcome of the exchange. And it was presented to a group of Foundation and Ministry of Education stakeholders following the trip. And so the data that I use in this study comes from participants' journals, semi-structured interviews, and participant observations in the field. Unfortunately, I was unable to travel with the cohort into Vietnam, but I had an opportunity to meet with them in person for some individual interviews, as well as participant observation in classrooms where teacher exchange program teacher alumna were hosted me in their classrooms and schools. And participant observation happened at 2 time points, in October 2018 and then October 2019, so over a year's time. And so using these data, I was able to bring together a corpus of journal entries that were using autoethnographic reflection principles to bring teachers into their practice. And drawing from Alan and others, I was interested in the ways in which that teachers sort of communicate or share these ideas about international achievement and their roles as educators in promoting international achievement via the testing of their students in participating in PISA. And so as part of this work, my positionalities as a white American woman working in the United States, living in the United States, but working internationally, is the importance of decentering my expertise. And so by working with teachers instead of researching teachers, it gave me an opportunity to develop relationships over time that would help me to learn more about the role of reflection in teachers' professional development, particularly when that professional development happens outside of teachers' local and cultural boundaries. And so before presenting the findings, I would like to share another quote from a teacher that I think really harmonizes the themes and findings of this study. And so this person identified as a social studies teacher within the Emirates cohort of the teacher exchange program. And so this person shared in quote, "I wonder a lot about why Vietnam was chosen, as all I know about it as a country with a long history of war, that no one would want to go there except for knowing about some developed issue or for exchanging expertise in the field of education." So here already, teachers were primed to think about learning that hidden secret, if we refer to the quote that I used to begin the presentation. Teachers were interested in learning the hidden secret that would help them to advance student achievement in the UAE in the same ways as it was advanced in the Vietnam system before PISA 2015. And so I'll highlight 3 findings from the study that I think are useful for our conversation today. And so I saw that teachers were seeing sameness and looking for differences. And so throughout their autoethnographic journals, one of the themes that emerged was that teachers saw things that they already do in practice. And so it's the idea that teacher learning or that teacher practice in some ways is very universal because of the focus of adults wanting to serve as caring, as caring adults in the lives of children. And so that idea really grounded teachers' experiences. And so when I asked teachers, what was the same and the things that you observed in Vietnam, they said that they saw that a lot of the practices that they were already using in their classrooms, particularly the use of small group instruction and a focus on STEM or a broadened view of STEAM, and cross-curricular instruction was already in use in their classrooms. And so that affirmed for teachers that they were, in quote, on the right path, and that they could mirror and model some of those same practices back in their classrooms because their students were used to it. The other thing that came out of teachers' reflections was the looking for differences. And so when teachers saw things that they interpreted as different from what happens in their schools and classrooms, a lot of it used a deficit framing. And so thinking about Vietnam, as the quotes that I shared before, as a surprising context for comparison and for policy borrowing. And so what was interesting to me is that some of the things that they saw, they reflected as the same. And when they looked for differences, it wasn't necessarily about differences in practice. It was about differences in the economic and social context of the 2 countries and how that might play a role in students' PISA performance. And so the other 2 themes that really were driven from the conceptual framework were these ideas of accelerated transfer versus effective transfer. And so returning briefly to Brookfield, we know that not all reflection is critical, but that critical reflection is necessary to really support teachers' transfer. And so what I learned from the data was that time matters. And so things like having a schedule, making sure that teachers have informal time to chat, to reflect, to collaborate informally is really, really important to their professional learning. Especially
Dr. Emily, speaking about the time, we have 2 minutes left.
Wonderful, thank you. And so time matters, in this case and others. And so the last thing that I'll highlight is the idea of effective transfer. And so recalling teachers' reflective journals, we know that teachers often default to a more descriptive way of writing about their reflections and experiences. And sometimes that idea of effective transfer can be used as a way to promote an understanding of, as my participants refer to, as goodwill. And so that might be another interesting way to think about how and what teachers write when they know that their reflections are being recorded for, a research purpose in this case, or for others. And so I'll leave you with a few conclusions, is that one of the benefits of international exchange is to develop an idea of cultural openness, which was stated as an important tenet of the teacher exchange program under study here. But that contextualizing intercultural professional development, like the training that teachers received or the experience that teachers received through the TEP, is really important to support transfer. And then lastly, we know that in the age of COVID-19, it's so important that teachers have opportunities to still engage in international exchange. And that one way that teachers are doing it, and we can continue to support them in doing so, is to promote virtual exchange for teachers. And so I appreciate your time and look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Emily. That was a very interesting study. And now we move to the Q&A section, and we have the first question addressed to Mr. Ayman. It says, very interesting presentation. Thank you, Mr. Ayman. How do you think that Abu Dhabi teachers could indeed be empowered during reforms particularly?
Thank you, Dr. Fatimah. Thank you, Dr. Ahoud and Dr. Natasha, and all the staff, the great staff behind the scenes who are supporting this conference to be successful. Thank you very much for this kind words in the question. In terms of Abu Dhabi schools, where I am also working right now, and a big deal of my experience is in Abu Dhabi, so this question is very correct to me. Teachers, as I mentioned in the presentation, teachers need to be listened to. Their voice should be heard, and we should keep them in the loop in terms of what's happening and any initiatives. You should be aware of any initiatives in advance and be prepared to meet the challenges of the expected challenge of implementing such initiatives. So there is a gap between policy and practice, and we need to listen to their voice in terms of how can we implement such initiatives in schools, because school context matters, the type of students, the demography or the area, for example. So teachers are aware of their context, and their voice would help in making the enactment of policy possible. So we need to listen to their voice, and they should be involved in every step and the whole process of reform.
And Dr. Ayman, there is another question for you. It says, can you elaborate more about the problems associated with short-lived initiatives that have been undertaken in relation to teacher development?
Yeah, thank you for this question and for the nice words as well. In terms of the initiatives, there are many very good initiatives being introduced, but the problem with this initiative that as I mentioned, the gap between policy and the practice. So we need to bear in mind how such initiatives would be implemented and in its enactment in schools. So, for example, there are some unclarity in terms of the pedagogical approaches to teachers. So teachers could interpret the messages of pedagogy in different ways. Some messages even may seem like conflicting to teachers, and even maybe school administration are not able to support teachers in this field. So some clarity should be present to support teachers and to make the initiatives long-lasting with impact on student learning, which is the most important thing.
Thank you very much. And now we move to Dr. Emily. Fascinating talk, Dr. Emily. My question is, have you seen in your data indications of how this might be likely to impact on the Emirati teachers' own practice when they return to UAE?
Thank you so much for the question. Yes, so I had the opportunity to revisit many of the teachers who participated in the teacher exchange program 6 months after their visit to Vietnam, and then a year later when the cohort from Vietnam traveled to the UAE. And so the program that I'm studying in this case is a reciprocal exchange. It doesn't necessarily mean that the same teachers have the opportunity to meet in both contexts, but there were many TEP or Teacher Exchange Program alumna who were part of the welcoming of the Vietnamese cohort when they came to UAE in October 2019. And so yes, in that follow-up visit, I was able to visit with teachers and observe in their classrooms to see how and to the extent that what they learned through their observational experiences in Vietnam were transferred into their classrooms. And so what I will say is that teachers reported that resources matter. And so a lot of the ways that we can really support and scale teachers' ability to transfer these kinds of experiences is to provide community. And so one of the ways that the teachers in my study really continued to learn with and from each other was maintaining an informal professional development network. And so one of the things that I think has been most impactful is not only their transfer and contextualization of the practices they observed through their study tour in Vietnam, but really the connections that they made together to support the changes that they wanted to make in their classrooms, and then to also kind of challenge some of the things that they observed in Vietnam to think about whether or not those practices responses would be contextually appropriate working with their students. And so, yes, I did see transfer. How and to the extent that teachers transfer is a longer study goal. And I appreciate your question. Thank you.
And Dr. Anderson, there is another question, and then we will move to our last question from Dr. Salwa Al-Jassar. So, Dr. Anderson, did teachers have different thoughts of the validity of PISA as a measurement that they should be used to compare among students in different nations? Mm-hmm. Like, for example, have any of them expressed whether PISA is more aligned to test Vietnamese students than the Emirati students?
That's a wonderful question. Yeah, thank you. And so I actually I have an article that's under review that's talking about this now that I'm happy to share with our GCES family later on. And so one of the things that I'm interested in looking more into the data about, and the article sort of primes this, is the extent to which teachers sort of engage in criticality to push back on the PISA as assessment metric. And so one of the things that I think is really interesting from the data is that teachers didn't necessarily question PISA, or didn't necessarily think that that Vietnamese schools and students were unique in their ability to improve their scores in those ways. But it was thinking about, teachers were really centered in their own practice and thought about what their roles were in supporting PISA as an international development marker and also as a national development goal, because of the ways in which that PISA is situated in the United Arab Emirates' larger education policy agenda through 2025. And so I think it's a complicated question, but I really look forward to more conversations around how we think about PISA and other international tests, particularly in their utility in the Gulf context, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Emily. And Dr. Durayra, we will move now and we will switch the language. Since the question is in Arabic, I prefer that Dr. Durayra, she answers it in Arabic. So we will, you can just press on the interpretation, globe icon. So يعطيكم العافية على العروض. سؤال لتمكين المعلمين من مختلف المهارات. ما هو رأيكم في مدى كفاءة كليات إعداد المعلمين في مستوى جودة البرامج ومهارات التدريس المستخدمة من قبل الأساتذة؟ لا زالت طرق التدريس الجامعي تقليدية ونظرية. شكرا دكتورة سلوى الجسار على سؤالك. دريرة معنا؟ دكتور أيمن.
اسمحي لي أعقب.
يس تفضل. سؤال الجميع.
أشكرك. طبعا أولا بوجه التحية للدكتورة سلوى، وسؤال رائع جدا، وأعتقد إنه في صميم اللي إحنا بنتكلم فيه كله، اللي هو مهارات المعلم. أنا يمكن الأستاذة الدكتورة سلوى طبعا أعلم مني بالشيء دوت، إن إصلاح المنظومة التعليمية في الأهم نقطة فيه أو بدايته يجب تكون من إصلاح التقييم والتقويم. فطول ما إحنا في الجامعات التقييم النهائي بيتم من خلال امتحانات تقليدية، فالمنظومة لن تتطور بالشكل الصحيح. حتى لو كان في أبحاث أو مهارات يعني متضمنه خلال العام الدراسي، لكن طالما التقييم النهائي بيتم بامتحانات تقليديه فمش هتطور. فانا في رايي الشخصي ان تطوير الامتحانات او نظام التقييم بحيث ان يكون في صوره ابحاث يكون فيها كريتيكال ثينكينج، تفكير ناقد، يكون فيها كرياتيفيتي، يكون فيها انوفيشن، هو ده اللي هيخلي الطالب المعلم يتلقى المهارات دي ويتقنها وهو اثناء دراسته الجامعيه، وبالتالي هيكون اقدر على تطبيقها مع طلابه لما ينتقل الى مرحله التدريس، لانه مارسها بالفعل واقتنع بيها. لكن اذا خدها بشكل نظري ولما يجي يطبق، هيطبق نفس طرق التدريس التقليديه اللي اتعلم بيها، اللي هي الطرق اللي يغلب عليها الطابع النظري اكثر من الطابع العملي، ومهارات البحث ومهارات التفكير الناقد ومهارات الابداع والتطوير وكذا. وشكرا.
Thank you, Dr. Ayman. Indeed, we were able to discuss very different perspectives from all over, the regions and the globe. I would like to sincerely thank all our panelists, Dr. Durayra, Dr. Emily, and Dr. Ayman, for all their fruitful, discussion today. I also like to end with that we were able to be connected today, and I hope to see you all in person after this pandemic is over. So stay safe and stay well. Thank you very much.